Okay, we are recording. Okay, so the bigger picture of all this is the purpose for doing the DON-R. The DON-R has absolutely nothing to do with eligibility. It has absolutely nothing to do with ranking people in any way. Um, and frankly, the total score is not extremely helpful. From the standpoint of our purpose is to develop a care plan. And that is, from DAS's perspective, the primary purpose of doing the DON-R. Okay. The level of impairment tells me, if done correctly, um, what the level of impairment is, um, which essential components the person can or cannot do, and the reason they cannot do those particular essential components. Okay. Um, those help me identify potential risks um, and potential concerns in developing and starting to frame a care plan. The second and equally important component of that is the unmet need for care. Okay. And a reminder, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, that um, level of impairment and unmet need are scored absolutely independently. The only time that's not the case, if the person has a level of impairment of 0, the unmet need is automatically scored as 0. Okay. Otherwise, it's scored absolutely independently. Okay. So what I want to do for a second is share out of the Otis manual. This is in chapter 114, guidelines for client assessment. And let me make that a little larger. And so, and I'm just going to kind of skim over this. I won't read it to you, but there are two purposes for scoring unmet need. The first is to identify what which domains are not being met and what assistance is available. And that's the who helps, how often. The second is to determine the risk to health and safety if additional assistance is not provided. Okay, so when scoring unmet need, I want to gather information from the consumer or the individual about what they perceive as the need for care and what's not being met, as well as using your observational skills. So, for example, if the individual says, yeah, my daughter's coming over, every other day and giving me a bath, but the clothes are stained, the skin is stained, there's an odor coming from the person, um, you know, there's a conflict there that I need to resolve. Okay. I also need to look at availability of the caregiver. And this is simply availability. I am not measuring caregiver stress through the DON-R. And there's been significant improvement in that shift. I see very little DON-Rs anymore that are talking about caregiver stress. The caregiver stress is measured through the Bacchus Caregiving Outcome Scale. We are in unmet need measuring availability of the caregiver. Okay. Um, so questions you might ask are you getting enough? Tell me if you're getting enough help with, what could you use more help with? Who is helping? Again, trying to avoid yes and no questions. Also look at observations. For example, mobility, clutter, appearance, unpaid bills, piles of laundry, those kinds of things. Okay. Um, and a quick review of the scoring. And Sarah, I'll let you go into some more detail if you'd like about these. So 0 is The need for assistance is met to the extent that there's no risk to health and safety if additional assistance is not provided. Okay. Or they have no need for additional assistance because the need is being met already, or additional assistance won't provide any benefit. Okay. Score 1, the need for assistance is met most of the time, and or there's minimal risk to health and safety if additional assistance is not acquired. 2, the need for assistance is not met most of the time, and there's moderate risk to health and safety if additional assistance is not required. And then 3 is the need for assistance is seldom or never met, and a severe risk to the health and safety of the client that would require some type of medical intervention. Okay. All right. So let's stop there. See if there are any questions or comments so far. Just type in the chat or just unmute yourself and holler. Any of that needs some clarifying or you have questions about? Okay. Let's see. Then let's jump into some examples. All right, let me make this one a little bit bigger, or a good bit bigger.
Tom, while you were looking that up, there was a question that came in.
Oh, okay. Let's see. How do you want us to record time that caregiver is available? Okay. So as a general rule, be as specific as you can. Okay. So caregiver can help twice a week. Caregiver can help four afternoons a week. Okay. That's usually sufficient in connection with the other comments and your scoring. Avoid words like sometimes and often and frequently and occasionally and after work. You know, the more specificity you can provide, the more likely you're going to get at scoring it correctly. Okay. Did that help, Monica?
Yes, yes. I
Okay.
just want to make sure because I sometimes, when they said we can sometimes help, so I need to dig more.
Yes.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep.
It's to add on to that, especially if they say, like Tom was mentioning, they say after work. We don't know what their work is. So is that like most evenings? That's the time frame they're looking at, like afternoons, morning, evenings, to get specific like that. It doesn't have to be, they can help from 3 to 5 every day. If you get that information, great. But the more specific you can go to know when, especially like time of day, that's a huge benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and going back to the vague language, I've seen several that says a client has difficulty with, that doesn't. So again, those sort of vague generalizing terms are not really helpful as far as understanding the picture. Okay, so number of times a week, number of times a day, if the client has some significant impairments, whatever that happens to look like. Okay. All right. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, let's jump into some case records. I think what I'd like to do, maybe Sarah, is let you kind of do the first one, and then we'll let the group help us pick apart the rest of them and see um, what they might do to improve them or what they suggest. How would that work?
That would work. Yeah, let's start with that and see how it goes.
All right.
And once again, I'm going to start with this caveat that when Tom had reached out to me and asked to kind of help just refresh on these look so much better. You guys are making strides over the last several years around this. To see essential components written into the comments for me is huge. And I feel so validated in the number of times that I felt like I was lecturing all y'all to put those in there. You guys are doing it. And I coming in and just reading like this one basic one, I have a better understanding just already of what's going on compared to some that I've seen in the past. So in general, you guys are doing great. So now we're trying to take it a step above. So in regards to this one, so we're looking at grooming. So, you know, because I already know about level of impairment. The comment is great around level impairment, saying what she's able to do, where things are getting difficult. That's when you know, a little bit more detailed there on what getting difficult, when, what part of it, but it's specific to, she's talking nail care there. But in regards to this, so one of the things that I was taught, for those of you that remember me, I said that if you scored, you needed to have a comment for each score you had. So if you scored for level impairment, you have to have a comment that goes with that. And then if you score for unmet need, there has to be a comment to go there. So one of the recommendations that I always did is that when you're looking at things, pick two colors. So your comment for level impairment, say, is going to be yellow. So you should, if you have a score of a level impairment, you should always have yellow involved there. And then if you also have unmet needs, say that's pink. You should always have then yellow and pink if you've got two scores here. So in this case, there is no comment around unmet need, because we're not looking at, we know there's an impairment, we know where it's at, there's information there. So now I need to know for unmet need. If you are telling me there's an unmet need, where is that unmet need? How often is it being provided at all? Is this their health at risk and risk to health and safety here? If someone is coming, which it sounds like there is, because need is met most of the time, who is that? How often is it happening? Needing that information as to make this a really super strong comment.
And I would add a couple. So one of the challenges here is you are the person interacting with the client. Sarah and I reading this are not. Okay. So, you know, let's assume here that this person is having challenges with toenail care. Okay. We can't see what's going on. Okay. If the toenails are just a little bit long and, you know, it's not having a significant impact, that's different than her toenails have grown so long they're curling under and making it difficult for her to walk, or, you know, they're digging into her foot some kind of way and causing infections. I mean, there's all kind of ranges of how these things play out. And so we don't know what those are, so it's important to explain those. The other thing is that impacts what my care plan is going to be. Okay. So if I have arthritis and it's difficult for me to bend over and trim my toenails, okay, and let's assume I'm not diabetic, so I don't need to go to the podiatrist, you know, it may be that an appropriate care plan is to get her to one of those nail places once every couple of months. Okay. Because you're probably not going to have a personal care aide come out just to do that. Okay. If, you know, if the person is diabetic, then that may be a podiatrist would be your care plan. If the nails are so long and so thick and they're causing other health issues, then the care plan may be to get her to, a primary care doctor. Okay, so the way that these are scored and the comments associated with it will determine what care plan you have that's appropriate. Okay.
And this is where I'm also gonna, for those of you that know me, I'm gonna plug in assistive technology here. Guys, I've got a great example of this. For example, my future mother-in-law has difficulties. She doesn't have grip strength in her thumb. So she can't do her own nails just because she's got arthritis and has lost that grip strength. So what I've done is they make the large handled nail clippers, and her and I talked through what she needed. She didn't have time to go in to have them done. Her husband's not going to help her with them, but I was able to purchase like for $5 nail clippers that had like a big grip on them, and now she's able to manage that herself. She doesn't have to wait on someone else or try to figure out how to do that. So that's just a really specific example, but I always want to plug in assistive technology because that is in some cases an option.
Look at you.
Yeah, I love my assistive technology.
And who is that you mentioned?
My future mother-in-law.
Oh, well, how about you? See what happens when you leave DAS? You get engaged and become happy.
And it brings you back to Georgia. So
That's it. Okay. All right. Any questions or conversation about this particular example? Okay. Let's go to the second one. And everybody, feel free to unmute yourself so we can have a conversation. If babies scream or dogs bark or the UPS man comes to the door, we don't care. We're just going to wing it. Okay. All right. So here is the second example. This is bathing. Level of impairment is 2. The person cannot perform most essential components. The unmet need is scored as a 1. The need is met most of the time. The comment says client has difficulty with all the components of bathing. She broke her back, has neck, back pain, muscle pain, feels anxious, dizzy, weak, and has a balance problem and history of falls. Client does not have anyone to assist. Okay, so unmute yourself, raise your hand. What questions, what suggestions you have either around the scoring or the comment? What else would you like to know in order to score it? Go for it.
Tom, this is Brooke.
Yes.
I guess the first thing that just kind of jumps out to me is that um, the comments don't really address the specific components. It's just more general and then goes over, all of the various problems that the person has.
Okay.
So I would maybe be more specific in relation to how much difficulty they have with drying their entire body. Can they do any of it? Or, I mean, I know it says all, but maybe just go through each specific one.
Okay. Other thoughts?
So for it said client does not have anyone to assist and a need is met most of the time. So it needs more explanation around that. So if she can do it, there has to be a sentence about that. And if she cannot do it, then the need, unmet need should be probably 3 or more. I mean, 2 or more. So
Okay. Other thoughts?
I would say who's helping meet the need, because it says that they can't perform most, but the need is met most of the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was wondering that as well.
Oh,
I hey, I was
y'all are
gonna.
bringing tears of joy to my eyes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to say that if no one is there to meet the need, exactly what service are they requesting? Because it's just saying something, but what are they specifically requesting that the Darnar can address to assist them?
Okay. Other comments or suggestions? Okay. Sarah, expert, what do you think of our comments?
Well, I'm going to mimic Tom with the whole crying thing because y'all just made me so happy with those questions, because those are the questions that I asked looking at this. Is I've got text there, but it's not overly relevant to bathing. So, Brooke, you had mentioned on there that it's just listing, her diagnoses. Diagnoses are not a comment. So it's specifically those essential components. What pieces of those are where she's unable, or this person is unable to do, specifically in bathing? How are those diagnoses and those problems relevant? There is a relevancy there, but I don't know what it is looking at this. You guys absolutely nailed on there. It says need is met most of the time is the score, but then it says client does not have anyone to assist. Which one's right? I don't know that reading it. And someone brought up like asking if there is someone, who is it? Great question, because the score is telling me the need is met. So who's helping to meet that need, and when is it not being met based on the score and the comment doesn't match?
But she's also saying that she's having difficulty with the components. It's not saying she can't do it.
Yes. Yep. And that's, yeah, great comment. And that goes back to the whole breaking it down, looking at each component there. Is they're all difficult, or is that actually it's getting in and out? And that's where it's super difficult. And the other ones, if they can do that one, they can get to the other ones. Great comments. This makes my heart sing. Y'all have made my Tuesday.
Hmm.
And then someone asked the question about, there's nothing here about what services they're requesting. And, while we are not assessing for a specific service, the way this is worded, I would have a really difficult time coming up with a care plan to address bathing, because I don't know, I don't have enough issue about what's going on. If it's, um, you know, some interventions may, assistive technology may be perfectly appropriate and helpful. Um, it may be that she needs some sort of personal help with a piece of it. And so who is that person going to be? So, um, y'all have done just an exceptional job of picking this one apart. I'm very happy. Yay, team. All right. Let's go to the next one. First of all, any other questions or comments about this, either out loud or in the chat? Okay. Oh, here's another bathing one. All right. Level of impairment is a 1. It says the person can perform most essential components. Unmet need, the need is met most of the time, so it is scored a 1. Comment says it takes a while to bathe due to COPD. Doesn't bathe every day. Okay.
The diagnosis COPD doesn't tell me why she's having trouble bathing. As a nurse, I would guess, but it would just be a guess. Is it because she gets so short of breath she has difficulty? But I would need to have that spelled out in the comment so I don't have to guess. And then doesn't bathe every day. Why not? Is that a choice? Does she choose not to take a bath every day? Or is it bathing has become so difficult, she gets so short of breath, she can't catch her breath, and therefore does not want to bathe any longer? Just need a little more information in there.
Yeah. There's also the piece of this about that sort of person-centered approach is what is her normal routine?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a webinar or something. Anyway, they were talking about um, this lady who she had never gotten in a bathtub in her life. She had always washed at the sink with a washcloth. And so trying to put her, have an aide come out and put her in a bathtub would have been clearly the wrong approach to this. So, what's her habit? What is her routine? If she, you know, got in the shower twice a week and the rest of the time, if that's her routine, that helps understand this particular situation. Okay. Um, and to Bené's point, COPD doesn't necessarily explain to me why she can't turn water faucets or regulate water temperature. Okay.
It doesn't say anything about whether or not she can get in and out of the tub either.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't address really any of the essential components. Can she wash and dry all body parts? Can she turn on the faucets and regulate the water temperature? That sort of thing.
Okay. So what kind of care plan would you develop for this person?
If I know more specifically what's going on, I would have to dig more, and then, like Sarah said, some assistive technology, like a shower chair, if she, can bathe herself, and also maybe portable oxygen, because with those lines, with the other oxygen, it's kind of hard to manage. And maybe some long thing to reach up better without uh, using her hands. So I like three things at least I see. Shower chair and handle would be one of those I would work with her about in her care plan.
Okay. How do you know those would be helpful from what you're looking at?
As I said, I would dig more, because
Okay.
without digging more, I don't know, but I would just definitely dig more for what could help her, and ask her if she has shower chair or grab bar or something like that. So
Okay.
that's what I would do.
Excellent. I think a good rule of thumb is if if you've scored a domain and you can't tell from what you've written what a reasonable care plan would look like, you probably need to go back and tweak your scoring or your comments. Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. Any other conversation or questions about this particular one? And while we're going through these, be thinking of questions you have in general, or if you've had one you've had weren't quite sure what to do with. We'll have some time at the end to talk through those. Okay. Oh, preparing meals, something other than taking a bath. How about that? All right. So to refresh, the essential components are opening packages or a can, pouring food into a bowl or pot, turning knobs on the stove, using other kitchen appliances, and washing and putting away dishes. The level of impairment here is a 2. the person cannot perform most essential components. The unmet need for care is a 1. The need is met most of the time. The comments say can do microwave food, but cannot stand and cook due to COPD.
It doesn't say what she can do as far as like opening the packages and cans. Doesn't say anything about the stove. Um, and if the need is met most of the time, how is it met? I mean, does someone else do the cooking for her?
Okay.
For me, says but cannot stand and cook. There is no any preparing meals, any components of cooking. There is open packages, pour food, turn stove on and off, use other kitchen appliances, but nothing about cooking. So there is not that element included anyhow. So
Okay.
I would want to know which essential components that she cannot do and physically why she can't do those.
Okay.
Question about the lady who asked about the preparing the food or cooking the food. Because this one is identified as preparing meals, is that something that we're not even looking at as far as cooking, or? I mean,
So on this one, it does say preparing meals, and that is a little, a bit of a gray area, and that's why I always default to the essential components. One thing I also want to throw in here is, one thing I have seen historically is everyone has a different concept of what a meal is and what cooking involves. And that's where it gets really hairy. And that's why the essential components are so important. I historically have seen comments that says they don't cook like they used to. That's not really what we're looking at here, unless it's impacting what is it, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, they used to make 5-course meals, and now they're only making like a 1-course meal. There's a difference there. The other thing also huge, and I just lived up north, so I can say this, is a big cultural thing. Cooking down here, for someone who may be traditionally from the South, is vastly different than someone who's up in the north. I learned that one the hard way. But so that's where it gets that gray area, and we're always just default back to those essential components. What pieces of this are where we're experiencing difficulties, and why are there difficulties?
There is a comment. I'd want to know what about COPD makes preparing meals difficult, and that's exactly right. The diagnosis in and of itself is not very helpful unless it relates back to those essential components. The other thing is this notion of I can't cook and I can't prepare a meal unless I'm standing up. You've got to be real careful here, because there are, it's not necessarily a requirement that I stand up to be able to prepare a meal. Okay. It may make it easier, but there are plenty of adults with disabilities who have learned to do all kinds of things without standing up. Okay. So, just as a caveat there. And if I haven't, um, what care plan, what kind of care plan would this look like with the information we have?
Hey, come on in.
So what would your care plan look like here?
Assistive technology, after I know why she cannot stand or what are the reason, she can use wheelchair, she can use some other stuff, can opener, if I know that she cannot open packages, if she gets tired, just talk to her, that talk with her that she can break the cooking in little components. She doesn't have to cook very difficult meals, and all that. Use scissors for opening packages, all that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Using paper plates. Sorry.
Yeah. So Monica is correct that from what's here, I really can't develop a care plan because I don't know enough information. So yeah, I need to be digging a little bit, asking a few more questions. You know, um, the other um, um, again, in going back with our sort of person-centered and capacity-based approach, one of the things you might try is say, well, how are you managing now? Okay, to see if they've already figured out some workarounds that you can build on, um, and kind of see how that's working. Um, some that may give you some clues as to where the difficulty is, or some ideas that that person's already come up with. You know, how are you doing it now? What have you tried? How has that worked? Those kinds of questions. This is our last one for the morning. Oh my goodness. This one's a grooming. As a reminder, the essential components are fixing hair, shave, nail care, brush teeth, or dentures. Level of impairment is a 2, cannot perform most essential components. Unmet need is a 1, the need is met most of the time. Comment says client is bedbound due to bilateral, AKA, what's an AKA?
The
Above the
same.
knee amputee.
Yeah.
Above the knee amputation.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that helps. I like that. Okay. And is legally blind. Client is unable to do oral or nail care without assistance. Client does not shave and has no hair. Okay, we have a comment that says, who assists the client and how often if the need is met most of the time? Yes. Okay. Other comments or input about this one?
There is definitely missing part about the who is doing assistance. Does she has caregiver or he? If she is bedbound and she doesn't have she has an amputated leg.
Okay. Yeah. Um, other,
Hello.
hello?
Hi. I just have my quick question would be the abbreviations because I've noticed that sometimes we all use different abbreviations for different terms. So when I see AKA, I think either always known as or Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. I wouldn't know exactly what the AKA stood for in regards to the dime R. So I would just want to know what the abbreviations mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was going through this first to get through this the first time, I finally figured out it was above the knee amputation, but when I looked at it this time, I didn't have a clue. So um, yeah. Um, thank you. A couple of comments that I find intriguing. One is I would like to know a better way to say bedbound. So Sarah, maybe you can help us with that. There's a comment, why is the client bedbound? Not everyone who has a bilateral amputation is bedbound. Okay. And then I'm gonna save Lynn's questions for later. So, Sarah, any thoughts on use of the word bedbound?
Um, Personally, I don't see, I would want more information. I think the second comment question that came in about why is the important part there is it there's extreme difficulty or it's extreme difficulty or extremely time consuming in order to transfer and that goes into a whole other thing, but transferring in and out of a bed. So they just, due to ease of that, they just remain in the bed for longer periods of time. Um, is where I would, it's what I would be asking and looking for, is that more, what does that look like for this person? That's where also where this comes in. So for the person scoring this and writing this comment, what do they define as bedbound? So there may be a difference in how that person versus, myself reviewing this, what is that definition? So not defaulting to this term and explaining it out is important. Then it also ties into using the acronyms. I have no idea what AK is. I'm medical. And I know Tom asked that because he wasn't for sure either. That I know a lot of y'all are nurses or have a medical background, but you may have others who are social workers or come from a different background that may not know those specific acronyms and the shortening of words. And that's why it's really important to always spell them out because you don't know what the other person may know who is reviewing it and helping with developing a care plan.
Yeah, I do think I think the comment about explaining why the person is confined to the bed or bedbound or whatever, there's a significant difference again in care planning with that's their choice because it's easier and less time consuming, or there's no one else to help them transfer. Um, you know, and so understanding a bit of why that is the case may provide some insight into what an appropriate care plan might be, whether that's a Hoya lift or whether it's some other um, you know maybe it's some kind of counseling because they're so depressed about their amputation they just don't get out of the bed. So again, trying to figure out what's the story here will help determine what the care plan is. Okay. There's another question here about when in-home services are put in place on subsequent DONR assessments, would the unmet need then be scored with services in place? Sarah?
Yeah. So the whole, and that is a very, and that's why like total scores and looking at those big lump scores are not helpful. They're there, that's just part of the form. But if that is a way to evaluate if the services that are put in place are doing what the hope is and what they're expected to do, is that you would see a decrease in unmet need because now that need is being met. And that way you know that the services and the supports that you've put in place are doing exactly what the intention of those services were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the purposes of the DONR that I didn't mention before is to measure changes over time. And so, that can look a variety of ways. So let's say I put in place some assistive technology And by definition, if I can perform the essential components with or without an assistive technology, I have no impairment. So my level of impairment may go down. I may put in place, a service of some sort or a person to help support the person, whether it's through consumer direction or whether it's through a formal service, and my unmet need for care goes down. Okay. They may have a health situation, a health incident, and their level of impairment increases. So, the purpose of these things is to measure that consumer's journey over time, and the scores and the comments help me do that and help understand that. So, yes, if I put services in place, my score should change. I also want to add as a caveat, it is possible to put in service and there still be an unmet need, okay, which may indicate that the level of service that you have suggested is not sufficient. Okay, maybe they need more than 5 meals a week, or maybe they need more personal care than twice a week. So it just because they have a service in place don't automatically score the unmet need is 0. Okay. So again, my purpose in these scores is to develop a care plan. Between my 60-day follow-up and my subsequent reassessment, I may determine that the services I have in place are not sufficient, and which means it's working the way it's supposed to. Okay. Did that answer your question, Lynn? Yes, excellent.
And that, just to harp on this one more time, that's that question right there, and looking at that to see the effectiveness and over the time what a person, their level of impairment and unmet need looks at. That's why comments are so important, is because that score is not telling you a whole lot as a whole, and it's the comments is where you're getting all of the majority of your information from. So being able to go back and pretty much like read that history to see what has worked or hasn't worked or what's changed or not changed is where, this is really super crucial. And that's why we've spent so much time harping on comments and sitting here, this whole activity to go through these comments to ask more questions that's why this is important.
All right. We're getting close to 10 o'clock. I want to open up for if there are any questions, any comments, any challenges you've had with scoring unmet need. This would be a great time to ask since Sarah is here. So please comments in chat or unmute yourself and ask whatever questions you may have.
Sarah, this is Brooke. I will just ask a quick one. I'm also a fan of AT. Just curious, I guess maybe what is another example of one of your favorite AT devices to use?
So here recently, like I said, it's been the fingernail clippers because that has been a game changer. The other one that I have seen a lot and that I personally like that is super simple is around eating, especially for someone who with a grip strength or arthritis in their hands and they can't. A fork and a knife and a spoon, and most of them have a really small handle and not being able to grip that. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy new ones. You can go to like Home Depot or Lowe's or somewhere and get the foam and wrap the foam around the handles, and it makes it bigger. So there's less grip strength that's involved. It's not as tight. In order for a person to be able to have that independence to feed themselves. So that's super empowering. And to be able to do that, I've seen it where there's been difficulties in other areas of care or within their lives, and getting back that independence to do something that's very personal has had a dramatic positive impact in other areas. So those I really, really love simple AT. It doesn't have to be, you know, a robot or a big expensive device. I love simple assistive technology, has the greatest impact. And yes,
Yeah,
wrap
thank
a washcloth around. Yes, there's a lot of household stuff that's already around that you don't have to purchase. Actually go out and purchase extra devices or spend extra money on that you can do. And if you're on Pinterest, there are a lot of things out there on Pinterest that you can look for ideas and suggestions and inspiration of things to try.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you, Brooke, for the question. Reba for the comment.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we will